Alright everybody, welcome back to a brand new video. Today I wanted to respond to a comment from one of you guys. You guys are also, you guys make some really good points and I want to try to respond to them in a video format, you know? And we can get more people talking about the topic. So this comment is from Dudang, so shout out to Dudang, bro. Now I've seen him before. So he says, I think video doesn't understand what problems for new players are. It spitballs ideas for symptoms of the problems, not the problem. So I like how it's starting, you know what I'm saying? Because it is an interesting point to kind of bring up that the game's issue is not necessarily what the points that he's bringing up as, even though the person in the video had mentioned that it is their first time playing the game and that experience of what that is like. But now they're coming in and they're talking about like what those things are and how it's difficult for a new player. But let's continue. So he says the first problem is not the tutorial, it is how different DBD is versus every other game. DBD, more so than any other game, is shaped by experience. You have to learn sound cues, visual cues, and have mental acuity for many actions in the game. Examples are generator spawns. Many new players will not notice the light posts on generators. It sounds so obvious when you understand this, but for many new players, they go into 50 games, which is like 150 hours, not being able to locate a generator. And skill checks are another thing that cannot be practiced in any other game, even though it's very easy. You have to do 100 games for normal checks. So Dudang makes a very good point here. The DBD is unlike many different games that exist, I would say, and it's very hard to even translate some skills from DBD into other games because it's so different and so unique in that way. The only other comparison I could think about is probably like For Honor, because that game had so many different things that you really couldn't translate to any other game at all. So it's interesting to see that that is the case, even with DBD as well. So I do understand this, and I agree with that. Like the skill checks, I would imagine would be very interesting to see, and I know we see that a lot with new players that play Survivor. They have that experience where they end up missing their skill checks because of that. It's very hard to land those things because you don't really like it's what other game really has skill checks for you to be able to land them consistently. You have to keep playing the game in order to understand it. And that also applies to the killer side, that with the amount of time and hours you put into characters, like that's how you are able to learn, as long as looking at guides as well. That's the only way you're able to really apply that information and try to understand how to play certain characters. I mean, that's how we've seen people improve with Blight, or even characters that seem more simple like Freddy, or even characters that DBD more than any other game is shaped by experience. It's 100% true with DBD. We can think about any killer you can select from the roster, whether it be Freddy, that may seem a little more simple or maybe intermediate with difficulty. You can look at a character like Trapper that may be considered more simple in terms of difficulty to understand. And then you can also take into account a character like Nurse that is considered the most difficult character to learn in the game. And that remains true with this character specifically. I mean, with this point specifically. The lack of skill deficit in the game for the new player makes players believe they need perks to counter hard points in the game. For example, many new players will think Technician to hit skill checks, or they need repair speed to finish gens, or they need anti-tunnel. They don't need any of those things, but the game doesn't give them low effort tools to soften the blow of these learning curves. By the time you unlock Decisive, by the time you unlock Windows, by the time you unlock Unbreakable or Technician or Enemy Commonly Newbie perk, the player already learns how to not need the perk. What this says is that DBD's skill floor is way too high for new players, especially on the Survivor side when they're 40 plus killers. It's not a pay to win issue, it's a skill floor issue. This is a very valid point. this is a very valid point, and I kind of agree with this, that the game starts off very difficult, very grindy even, I would say. I think there's a lot of things that get in the way when you start out playing the game, and it's definitely very difficult to get into, but I also agree that the game doesn't make it easy for you either, right? Like, there's not a lot of general free perks that you can use that will give you a lot, and I will say that there are a few perks that you can pick up from the free selection that is in the killers that you start with, but it does take a little bit of time to get those blood points, dump it in there, and then you know, level them up in order to get those perks available for you. Now, I made this point before. I've said that when you're trying to play a new killer brand new, you're also going against players that are new as well. Like, that's just how the game kind of works, especially when you don't have MMR. You're going to be going against you know, new players as well. That's how MMR kind of functions. And as much as they're going to miss their skill checks, and as much as they're going to make mistakes, you're also going to make mistakes. And that's how that works. Now, the other point that he makes is, like, by the time you need these perks, you kind of learn how to counter it. It's kind of true. By the time that you're really able to, unless you figure out, like, what those perks can do, and then you try to utilize those perks, you kind of don't really need them anymore. Like, Technician is a good example. I will say, though, with Windows of Opportunity is, like, super meta, as we know. Very super meta. Unbreakable, super meta. And the thing is like, because of the ease of use of the perks, they carry over into the next levels of experience, where the higher the experience, i.e. the MMR increases and stuff like that, then you start seeing those newbie perks get used more and more and more, because they lack downside for using Windows, for example. Like, you're just always having aura. You're always going to see those pallets, and if it's not there, you know not to go there. Unbreakable has a one-time use, and because of its mere existence, its strength is within the fact that it exists. If you have people down and then they just get up on their own and pick each other up, all your pressure shatters in just from having that perk alone. So it sort of becomes a perk issue, which does start leaning into the pay to win kind of thing. However, Unbreakable is a free perk. Windows is not. And I will agree, though, it is not a pay to win issue, it's a skill floor issue. Because, like, at least from my understanding, when you first start the game, you're not going to need those crazy perks. It's when you start going into the average and the high, you know, like, skill leveled opponents that I would say are where you kind of need them more, as a way to counter certain things and stuff like that. And it's very tricky in that sense too. But it's really hard to say, like, for the game to be directly at least for the game directly to be difficult for the new players, it makes complete sense. But obviously, like Dudang is saying here, the main problem with the game is the fact that it requires you to sink a lot of time in for you to get that experience, and for you to be able to walk away, like, knowing that type of stuff, which makes it harder to pick up, which is ultimately, I think, the point here for problem one. Problem two, obviously, is the lack of skill deficit. Like, there's not a lot of options for you when you start out, so it makes a lot of things that are that require you to put the time in a little hard to get into. I would say it's an obstacle. So, third problem, DBD is a huge knowledge check game. A big way for how to learn chases or tiles is by experiencing the killer chasing after you, then making a move. That is just the first step, but there is a second step that is huge, memorized, required to play the game. Need to memorize like 30 maps as a new player and know where every single pallet spawns and window spawns before you can develop any form of past experience of a killer chasing you. Which also I agree with this, and I can put it on the inverse as well. Like when you are playing a killer for the first time and you're starting the game as well, you don't really know. Not only do you not know what the power can do, you don't know how to use it efficiently, and you don't know where pallets are. So, and you also don't know how to play the tiles well to counter it either. And I don't think there's many videos that exist in the current day and age that you can use to be able to counter tiles and stuff like that with characters. And there is people that are very good, that have been playing for many years that are able to kind of show a couple of clips of it here and there and within their videos. But even then, there's still so much to learn. And I completely agree. Like, it's a knowledge check. Completely. Like it's just like any other game, it's going to require you time, but I would say that it's a game that's a little bit more difficult to pick up in comparison to other games that require the same amount of hours. I feel like fighting games, I think, is like the best way for me to compare it, because a fighting game also requires you to understand what your character can do. And then, like, just like DBD, there's like kind of like frames to it, where you have like the first thing is like, okay, you start, and then you're just gonna have to get used to how it feels and all that kind of stuff, and understand you're gonna lose a lot, but you will, pick up a couple things. Then you move on to the next part where it's like, okay, now you want to start making like small little combos, learning maybe a bread and butter. And with DBD, I think it's kind of like, okay, now you kind of have seen the maps enough, you can kind of start guessing where the pallets probably are or where the good tiles are. And then you start hitting the next bracket, where now it's like, okay, I can make a combo now, and maybe I'm not too consistent with it, but I can make a combo now, and now I can start learning frame data. And then frame data, as you know, in a fighting game, is like, okay, well, this is plus on block, so I can use it to pressure people blocking. Or, okay, this is minus on block, so, or whatever have you. Or this has a long recovery frame. So, you have to kind of keep that kind of stuff in mind. So I think that also works with DBD as well. You put the time in, the more you start to get more experience, you start to notice a lot more things, you start to kind of tighten up on your mistakes. Now, that obviously doesn't apply to every player, because we do know that there's plenty of players with many hours that still make tons and tons and tons of mistakes overall. Like, we've seen those P100s that don't have any looping ability and stuff like that. Like, we've seen it before. And yeah, it does make sense. And I know that like DBD and a fighting game are like two completely different like animals to talk about, but it's the only way I can kind of frame that sort of experience level, where you start off with one thing and you have to kind of break it into little phases of it, because there's so much to take in. There's so much complexity and depth to a lot of things. And DBD is almost infinite with how much information you can get about it. I wouldn't, well, maybe not almost infinite, but you get the idea. So it says, so he continues to say, because of how many maps exist, it's impossible for new players to develop repetitive experiences in their games to learn the game. Compared to, say, League of Legends, where every time you spawn, it's the same map. You're not learning anything about the map. CSGO, you can play the same map many times. DBD is unique, where there's so much variation. To new players, it's overwhelming. So I also agree with this as well, literally because of the fact that you have so much RNG when it comes down to tiles and shack, if the basement's in there, and like a window may spawn here at one point, may not spawn another point. There may be like a pallet in a different spot than you remember last time. And there's a lot of RNG when it comes to those things. So sometimes you'll have a window spawn a certain way connected to a jungle gym, and it just becomes like a super strong tile. And it's very difficult to keep up with an M1 killer. And that I can see, like, I don't think a lot of games do that. I do know that in at least like most games, if not all, like when you're playing a game with a map like Call of Duty, like CSGO, like he said, I don't even know another example, like may like I even think maybe Apex if you want to go that far, even Fortnite if you want to go that far. Like those maps don't tend to change much. You know, they like those locations in the chest may like, you know, where you get loot may change, but the map still stays the same. Like, you know, this location's on this point of the map and it's going to pretty much have the same stuff I expect it to have. But with DBD, it's like, you know, like you can go to the map you like, and then sometimes you just may get like a variation that may not be too favorable for you. So I agree with that. So he says, while I only talk about this from Survivor's point of view, it is not that different from a killer point of view either. Ever tried picking a nurse as your first character because it's one of the free characters? Imagine how overwhelming a new player would get from picking that. Scratch marks, blood marks, random endurance perks, bully squads, all that stuff will appear for low MMR killers. These were all experiences for me like 8 years ago when I first started playing. But to a new player, these same experiences are even more pronounced for anyone that begins playing DBD in 2025. So I completely agree with this comment. So I can see exactly the points that we're coming up with here. Like, this is exactly the issue. What comes down to the game, I would say, is that because the game is so deep and complex, like the tutorial is almost a joke in comparison to it, because of the fact that there quite literally is so much to learn. There is like so much to talk about, like, and it's hard to even begin, you know, trying to explain it to a new player. And you know, it's why I was talking about coaching in another video. You know, I do offer coaching to members and stuff like that, or if you want to for the YouTube channel, if you're a sub on Twitch. And if you just want to have like a match review, you don't have to do any of that. You can just submit it on the Discord. Just make sure you include your hours played in the post in the channel for the coaching, and I could do a match review for you guys so that, you know, we can try to help improve. And I'll also try to drop a couple of like guide type things just to kind of help out with maybe some people that are a little bit more new when understanding the game. But I do appreciate all the comments, you guys, you know what I'm saying, because this helps kind of bring in more points and more perspectives onto the conversation. And this is an interesting thing to talk about. I really like this idea that, you know, the issue isn't really like, the issue is really just the fact that there is so much to learn, and because of somebody new coming into the game has so much to learn. And I can see that it can be very overwhelming, and hopefully, you know, the guide videos that people are putting up, and hopefully, you know, won't feel too overwhelming, and they will sort of like a fighting game, maybe stick with it, and hopefully we'll be able to improve. And I do find that despite the fact that even, you know, Survivor, from the perspective of the comment, Survivor is already difficult, I find that Killer would be double that, because of the fact that you're learning how to counter these tiles, scratch marks, blood pools, you know, perks that you probably don't even understand what they do, and bully squads like he mentioned as well, which is its own thing. And also understanding the killer's power, because that takes a lot of time. And, you know, say for example, you know, you come in and you know, say you're a Silent Hill fan and you want to play Pyramid Head. That already has like a lot of nuance and a lot of things to talk about. Or something simple like trying to play Myers or something like that would be tricky as well, right? And I want to respond to another comment here. So from Danica, once again, you know, shout out to Danica, man, because always bringing in the W comments. So here we are. Let's go ahead and respond to it. So it says, I think the biggest problem with the new player experience is just the absolute overload of information there is. There's almost 300 perks on both sides, and that one needs to be aware of if they want to do well in the game. There's almost 40 players now, with each with their own unique powers, unique add-ons and whatnot. A whole bunch of status effects. You need to know which loops are good, which aren't as good as a survivor. As a killer, you need to know how to use your power efficiently. And to add on to this, by the way, I want to add on, before I continue reading, I want to add on the fact that you need to be able to counter loops as a killer as well, to try to be able to, you know, get the downs and stuff. a little bit more efficiently. Okay, so on both sides, you need to have the game sense to figure out what you need to be doing or where you need to go. There's just so much information that goes into a match that you just won't figure out as a new player due to the sheer mass of it all. Also, some people use flashlights to be toxic. I use some flashlights to make my friends don't die. We are not the same. Yo, F bully squads though, they're the only there to make the match miserable for you. I completely agree. And we actually have a couple responses here to the comments. So it's, I have 2 weeks of DBD and the second killer upgraded was Hillbilly for the sole purpose of dealing with bully squads. I'm all in for using flashlights as a defense mechanism, but trying to chase someone and being constantly ambushed by flashlights is just crap. The moments I see 3 flashlights, I pick the perk and play with it. I'm so sick of it. So I'm glad we had somebody like, you know, sort of tuning in as a new player to like jump in and respond to it as well, which is very interesting. That's really good to add more to this sort of comment. So another one says here, I started playing a few days ago and honestly bully squads aren't too bad for me. I don't know if I'm just been getting lucky or if it's more that I don't have great substantial knowledge of the game yet, but it feels like I could have learned counterplay in the middle of the game. So very good points here, man. I appreciate you guys' comments, and it does add more to the conversation. And I do think that the biggest issue with new players on DBD, ultimately, as the other comment had mentioned, is just the information overload. There's just so much stuff that you could be going up against that you just simply wouldn't know about. And I think it's very difficult to sort of get used to that. And I honestly have no idea like what to do with that, you know what I mean? I can't even imagine starting the game nowadays. But thankfully, you know, I was able to get through it and now we're here, you know what I'm saying? It's not perfect, obviously, but we're definitely getting there. And yeah, it's great to see more people talking about this topic. And this is a pretty good follow-up for the new players, man. So we got another comment here from White Rabbit. Let's go. And shout out to White Rabbit as well. I appreciate all the comments. But so White Rabbit says, if you say something is either pay to win or not in a polar either or, it's fair to say DBD is not pay to win, but pay to win is a spectrum. So that is interesting. I didn't even think about that point. I figured that pay to win would be like as direct and clean cut as like a game. Like if anybody's played this game, it's a free basketball game, 3-on-3 freestyle. That game, you genuinely had to buy like everything in that game for you to be able to even have a chance in any match. Like, and it wasn't even like ranked. It was just casual matches. You just load up and then you would like get people. Like you would have characters that were like, you know, centers or something like that could land like 3-pointers from across the court, and you're just like, how are they able to do that? But they bought all the cards so that they can upgrade their characters to have insane stats. So when I think about a pay to win, I think about something like that. And let's continue. So it says here, while it's obviously not as pay to win as some say gacha game or whatever, it does have a couple pay to win elements. Oh, okay. So firstly, of course, killers. Nurse is the convenient excuse as an original base game. You get her from the start S tier. But after her, there's a whole lot of nothing if you don't enjoy her. Which you could argue maybe Hillbilly would be like very strong as well, technically speaking. I'm not sure if he's still considered S tier at this point. Maybe like a high A. I don't know for sure. A counterpoint to lessen the value of this excuse is an S tier killer is that she's not easy to learn, especially if you're brand new and have to figure out so many things, all the macro knowledge, which is overwhelming for a baby killer, etc. Yeah, like I hear it a lot too that when somebody starts playing DBD, they highly recommend do not play Nurse. And the mere fact is because you need that macro experience, and that because it's unlike any other killer in the game, playing Nurse as your first killer is not recommended at all. But she is considered the strongest killer in the game, you know, because of that. And it does, if we're speaking specifically pay to win, then yes, like, you know, that it does go against it. But however, it could, like, you know, I want to continue and see what the point is. So She is definitely not a good choice to learn the game, but more importantly are the perks. What if the gens just go flying? Ask anyone and they will tell you about some pain res or whatever perks. So buy the artist. Some builds just won't work well if you're missing out on perks and you don't even get into the fun part. That is a valid point too. That's a valid point as well. And then this one says, making your own builds can be a lot of fun if you're into it. Survivors have also a bunch of very good perks in the base game. But will a new player get that much value out of them? They probably will get a lot of value out of anti-tunnel perks, especially with an open profile that scream, hey, I'm new to the game, please do not tunnel me. So equip DS, off the record, whatever, and those perks basically play themselves. Even if a new player will likely get downed again 10 seconds later. But there's the next kind of perks that come into play. Windows of opportunity to turn basic new player friendly pathing into paint after numbers. Just go yellow. Oh boy, why not put the lithe on top of that? Occasionally jump a window instead of only pre-dropping every pallet on the map while holding W and feeling like a pro. And that's my biggest issue with a perk like Windows of opportunity, because like for a new player it's great. It's like, okay, cool, like, you know, you're able to use the perk. If you're able to get the perk in the shrine or whatever have you, you're able to finally be able to see where pallets are. But then it leads to mindless running, pre-dropping, exhaustion perk into pre-drop, into runoff, into blah blah blah. And it's just very boring to go up against, and it also means that they're not able to fully learn the game properly in that sense. So they just keep doing that over and over, and then they get mad when it doesn't work. And I would say the same thing with anti-tunnel as well, like at least from a killer perspective. It's one of those things where like at the low level it's way stronger, because it's like a lot of people don't have enough perks, or maybe they're just not experienced in chase, so it becomes very difficult to deal with. And then when you get into more experienced players, they'll just use those perks and it's extremely powerful. And that leads into the biggest issue with the game's balancing as a whole, which is obviously the fact that they're trying to balance for all these experience levels. Like, you're trying to balance for the new players, you're trying to balance for the average, you're trying to balance for the sweats, all at the same time, and it makes everything extremely difficult. In every level, basically, because it's crazy. It's kind of insane. So I think that it is a little bit pay to win, though. But as it's a tough predicament with the game balancing, because you have perks that are sort of there for the new players that kind of need those perks, and then you have those perks where you have those perks where like you kind of need them as a new player, but then you also have those perks where they end up getting used at the higher levels too, and then it becomes even more irritating to go up against as it is. So it becomes both a crutch, and then it also just kind of transforms into like meta at the same time, and it's unfortunate that that's the balancing on how it goes. But let's continue. So for perks, of course, we have the next good for nothing cheap excuse to Shrine of Pope's Balls. The biggest point, in my opinion, is newly introduced killers and perks pre-nerf. My favorite example is original ultimate weapon. Survivors need one perk against screaming, another perk against the aura, and it follows the killer around as their terror radius. Hook in the corner, go outside, camp and outside anti-camp range, throw a hatchet at everyone that screams while trying to unhook. Easy GG every match. Easiest game of my life. Alright, enough of a book for now. Good night. Yeah, I do see that as well. Like, that is a sort of a counter to the pay to win just a bit, by the fact that there is the shrine that you can get perks from. And I think one of the bigger issues is obviously getting shards is difficult, but I can see why they make it that way. Because you don't want people to they obviously want people to buy their licenses, and obviously even more so buy their original characters, and by like, and ultimately make a little bit extra of cash on it. And I get it. But that also affects the new players pretty heavily, and that also can kind of suck, you know, especially when they're like, "Hey, I just bought the game. Like, where's like don't I get anything else?" You know, and I do wonder if by adding some kind of welcome package for people starting the game, maybe would help. Like, maybe they can start off with a certain amount of currency. I know they've been slowly adding some stuff like that, because they do, like, now they have it to where when you buy a character, like, you already have one of your perks already equipped, and I think it's unlocked without having to level them up, I believe. So I think that's in the game currently. It's not enough, obviously, but I can, like, I see, like, there's like a lot of, like, this topic in general with new players is very difficult to figure out, because of the fact that there's a lot of nuance to it. There's a lot of things that go into play, and there's not a right answer, I would think, because there's too much, like, there's too much that, like, there's too much of a difference that could affect the new player. Like, there's just so much, you know. Like, a perk change that could affect, like, a low level, like, for the low levels, will completely impact everybody else, and it's not easy to balance it. And I can see why, like, we're having such a ridiculous balancing. But with that being said, everybody, thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, comment, subscribe, do all the YouTube things for me. If you want to support the channel, we have the links in the description. And if you want to follow on Twitch to watch me play Kill Live, we have that also in the description. Consider becoming a member on YouTube, and maybe joining the Patreon for exclusive content. And I'll see you guys in the next one.